Here we go. So I am now recording, and now I'm going to go back to this. I'm going to share this screen. Here we go. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. And I am now going to talk about Luther tonight. And as I said last week, Luther was a monk, but then he decided that the Augustinian order decided that he would become a priest. So on April 3rd, 1507, Luther becomes a priest. All right. There we go. So what he's going to do is he's going to walk into this square, which you can see in Erfurt. It is still there. Everything is in place. On the left is St. Mary's Cathedral, which is where he is going to be ordained a priest. To the right in the same square is St. Severin's Church. These are two iconic churches in the city of Erfurt. And so here's where Luther is going to head. He goes up these steps. There is no easy way to get to this church. You head up these steps to get to the church. And remember, as I said, as Luther was growing up, this was the most popular image of Jesus. Jesus as the judging Jesus. Out of the right ear comes a lily for those who have been admitted to heaven. Out of the left ear is a sword for those who have not measured up and are condemned. So you have this picture of the judging Jesus, which is everywhere. Luther grew up with this. He understood what this meant. Jesus was the judge. And so as he comes to the cathedral, he's going to walk to the cathedral, which is on the left, but on the right side of the screen is the main door into the church, into the cathedral. And above every door in every cathedral across Europe is the judging Jesus. All right, and that's important. So the ones on his right side are the saints. The ones on the left side are those who are condemned. And what is going on here is this terror of the holy. If you look at the Sistine Chapel, right behind the altar is the judging Jesus. This is Michelangelo on the left, painting the judging Jesus. On the lower part of the screen, you see again a picture of mural from the early Middle Ages of the judging Jesus. The lily coming out of the right ear, giving blessing to the saints. On the left-hand side are those who did not make it. And so this is the person you can expect to meet, the judging Jesus, at the pearly gates, and they will decide whether you get entrance or not. So he comes into this church. This is the reconstructed cathedral in Erfurt. He will then be ordained a priest. And then he returns back to his cloister. This is the cloister in Erfurt where he served. This is the Black Cloister of Observant Augustinians. This was a mendicant order, which meant that every day they went out on the street and they begged for pennies, alms, panem propter deum, bread for the love of God. And this was part of their work. They begged. And so this is where he returned. This was a very strict order. He chose this intentionally. Okay, so he was going to show God how good of a monk he could be. I'm going to earn my way into God's sight. All right, I'm going to be the best monk. I'm going to do it correctly. So he returns to the order. Now remember, he's ordained on April 3rd, and he can say now Mass. It is postponed until May 2nd, intentionally, so that his father would come, to the cloister and see his son celebrate his first Mass. Martin Luther's father shows up, Hans, with 20 of his colleagues, people he worked with. So he has a great deal of money that he can bring people from Mansfeld, and he can bring them to Erfurt and wine and dine them as Luther celebrates his first Mass on May 2nd, 1507. You can go into the Erfurt Monastery. It is still there. You will see this in the wall. That is where he sat that day as he was about to say Mass. He comes, this is where he's sitting on May 2nd, 1507. He says Mass, and after he consecrates, he realizes that God is present and there is no mediator. He's in the presence of the Almighty. So this is the picture that appears in a book of the judging Jesus. So there's the terror of the holy. So what happens? Luther has a panic attack. He can't finish appropriately. He's afraid, because he's afraid that he is just consecrated and now God is present, and he has no mediator, and he doesn't know where he fits, whether he would be admitted into heaven or whether he would be condemned. All right? So here we have this. Here we have this moment where Luther is there on May 2nd, 1507. He is celebrating Eucharist and he has a panic attack. Okay, so here we are. So now, Luther is now a priest and he's serving, and he goes to confession quite frequently. He's in the confessional for many hours at a time. And his spiritual advisor, who's named Johannes Staupitz, is concerned because after an hour or two, he hasn't really heard anything that would upset him, that was a sin. He couldn't figure this out. So Luther is judging himself. And if we know how we can judge ourselves and how we can be occasionally harsher on ourselves, so this is Luther. He's in the confessional judging himself. Okay? So here's Luther judging himself. So his spiritual advisor is concerned as to what's going on. So he has an idea. Luther monk, now Luther priest, go back to graduate school. Do something. Take some courses. Keep busy, and maybe this will work for you. So where does Luther return? He returns to the place he left a few years ago. He goes back to the University of Erfurt in 1507, and he is going to register to start taking courses to earn his doctorate in theology. Okay, so Luther is back. He is then in lectures. He's thinking, he's reading. He's no longer judging himself. Well, he's there for 1 year, and he gets transferred to Wittenberg. Here you are. If you go to Wittenberg, this is the Augustinian monastery in Wittenberg. This is where Luther was transferred. This will become the Luther household after the Reformation. So this is an important site for us Lutherans. This is where Luther was in 1508 as he's sent to the monastery. And after the Reformation, the elector will give him this house. It becomes his house. So it's school, house, hospital, it's everything. So here we are in 1508. So what makes Wittenberg, how's this going to all work out? Well, now here's where we're starting to set up the pieces on the chessboard, if you'll bear with me. Wittenberg is a new city, okay? It's a new city. And on July 6, 1502, this is while Luther is back in Erfurt, the Emperor Maximilian gives Wittenberg the opportunity to establish a university. So in 1502, Wittenberg has a university. Luther's in Erfurt. That university was established in 1397. So it has a heritage. It has a bit of, how should I say, it has a tradition. So here's this new young university. And on the left-hand side, you see what is called the bull. The bull is what allows this university to be created. So what is the bull? The bulla. If you notice in the document I have on the left side of the screen, you notice there's this red circle that's tied with wool. That is the bulla. It is the seal. So when the Pope releases a bull, what it means is there's a document with a seal on it from the Pope. So Maximilian, the emperor, has written a bull. And this bull says that Wittenberg now has the opportunity to establish a university. And there is the bulla, right there, that red seal that is attached to this document, which would have been on vellum or animal skin. Okay, because this is very durable. This is not parchment. This is animal skin, very durable, very important. So here we are. So what he has done is he is in Wittenberg in 1508. He continues studying at the University of Wittenberg. The coursework, this is a new school, and doesn't have the prestige that Erfurt has, but he does his work. And there's the license. He has to return 1509 to Erfurt. And he turns to the university and he says, I have completed my coursework. Will you grant me the degrees? Sounds rather, how should I say, audacious. But he can ask for that privilege because that's the way it works in Germany. And they are in agreement. So what happens? in March of 1509, the University of Erfurt delivers to Luther his bachelor's of the Bible, Baccalaureus Biblica. He can now teach courses in the Bible because he has earned his degree. He started his study in Erfurt in 1507. He continued it in 1508 in Wittenberg. He goes back to Erfurt and he says, I have completed my studies. Will you grant me the degrees? It sounds odd, but it's okay. He is within his right. Later in 1509, he now receives his Baccalaureus Centenarius. So what are the sentences? This is how you learn theology. These are Peter Lombard's sentences. You memorize the text. And it's one sentence after this other that you then memorized these texts. And that's how you taught theology. It was called scholasticism. It's thinking about God logically through the lens of reason. And you master these sentences, and now you now have this wonderful degree, a bachelor degree. You have a bachelor degree in Bible and a bachelor degree in theology. Voila. Now he spends 1510 in Rome. We're not going to talk about that. But in 1511, he's returned to Wittenberg. He's assigned a post there. So now he's back in Wittenberg in the Augustinian order that he belongs to. They have a cloister in Wittenberg, and that's where he returns. He was there in 1508, and then he got his degree, did classwork there, goes to Erfurt, does more classwork, then he gets his degrees. He's in Rome in 1510. He comes back to Wittenberg, and he's then sent here to work. All right, so he continues his studies. And what he does, and let me talk to you about Wittenberg. This is the capital, and we're going to talk about this capital city. There are 400 buildings. There are 400 buildings in Wittenberg. It has a population of about 2,000 to 2,500 people. It's a capital as of 1485. I think Paoli has more people in it than Wittenberg did. Okay, so Wittenberg is a small little place, but it has a name. And we're going to understand what this means because it's connected with electoral Saxony. And that's where I have to get you tonight. We're going to set up the chessboard. So here you are in Wittenberg. Wittenberg, 400 buildings. That's all it is. And I've got maybe 2,500 people there. That's it. This is a small place. They roll up the sidewalks at 5 in the evening, okay? This is not the place of, this is not Erfurt. This is a little place, a very tiny place. All right. So here we are. So now the big day, October 19th, 1512, Luther walks to this church, which is down the street from the Augustinian cloister. He walks down the street to this church. This is a beautiful church. This is the Castle Church. The tower there was refurbished. Church was refurbished in 1892 by the Hohenzollerns, the royal household of Prussia. And that tower was rebuilt. And the top of that tower is the Prussian crown. That is the crown of the Prussian kings and the emperors of Germany. So it was fashioned. So you were always reminded who renovated this church in 1892. He walks to this church on October 19, 1512, and he walks inside and he receives his doctorate in theology. All right. So on October 19, 1512, he received his doctorate in theology. I was ordained to the Lutheran Church on October 19th, but not in 1512. I was ordained in 1980, a few years later. But October 19th, it's like I can remember that date. He made a doctorate of theology the same day I was ordained into the pastorate, into the old LCA. So here he is. He's now a doctor of theology. He's in the university town. So he's going to start giving lectures. All right. So these are the course of the lectures Luther is going to start delivering. He gets his doctorate October 19th, 1512. He starts lectures. The first class he offers is in the Psalms. Well, that's a no-brainer. You see, when he went to Erfurt University in 1502, he joined a fraternity, the Gate of Heaven, Porta Coeli. And part of the rules of that fraternity was you would recite the Psalms every day. You would follow the liturgical order of the Psalms. So he has been saying the Psalms for the last 10 years of his life. And knowing how how assiduous they were about this, how they kept working at it. He probably said all of them within 2 weeks. That was how it worked in the orders. So he's been saying the Psalms in Latin for 10 years of his life. So he's now a professor. What would you like to teach, professor? Well, let me teach something I know by heart. I can teach the Psalms. All right. So Luther goes in to teach the Psalms. So we're going to do Psalms, Romans, Galatians, Hebrews, Psalms, Galatians. Here we are. 1514. What you're looking at is the church down the street. You saw the castle church. This is the church down the street. This is St. Mary's. This is the city church. This is the city church. This is where he will be installed as pastor. So he will be preaching. He will be hearing confessions. He is a pastor. So he is lecturing. So he is in the lectern. He is, he's at the lectern, but he's also in the pulpit. So he's multitasks. He's priest, he's monk, he's professor, he's pastor. So he's got a lot on his plate. So here we are. So I'll get back to this next week, but this is what a textbook would look like. And it's all in Latin, and I'll explain what's going on the page here. It's very complicated, but it's very exciting, very exciting. We have a copy of this. This is from the Cross Memorial Library. This is up in the rare book room. And this is so cool to look at. And I'll explain this next week. But I just want you to say, this is what it looks like. Luther goes down to a printer, and Luther says to the printer, I would like to do something a little differently. I don't want all of that. What I want you to do is I want you to print the Psalms. I want you to print them with nothing in the columns, nothing in the margins on either side. And I want you to leave a space between each line of the Psalms. Okay, see, look at what you've got here. This is your typical textbook. It's all filled up with the voices of the historical theologians. It's all here. Luther says, I want this. I want this. I just want the text. And we're going to write some things down, and maybe we'll have some original thoughts as I lecture. So this is actually Luther's notebook. It has survived. That and the book of Romans has survived. So we see what he is writing, what he is reading, and he hands to his students, which is absolutely priceless because he's changing the format. He's changing the format. Just give me lots of white space. Let's have some original ideas. Let's do some things differently. All right. So here we are. So this is what it looks like. That's Luther's handwriting. And he's talking about Psalm 22. Psalm 22. You know it by heart. You know it as Psalm 23. There's a difference in the numbering in the Latin Bible and in the Bible we have. So this is, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. So this is the Psalm, and he's teaching Psalm 22 that we know as Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, and here are some of his notes. This is how he teaches. But notice what Luther did. He walked in and he changed the format. He changed the format and said, let's do something a little differently. I'd like us to just see the word. I just want you to see the words of Scripture. Let's leave the commentary out for a moment, and let's leave the space white so you can write all over it. All right. So Luther goes and becomes the doctor of theology in 1512. In 1515, Luther was an unknown entity. We know that because a catalog was published of the 3 youngest universities in the German-speaking territories: Leipzig, Wittenberg, and Frankfurt an der Oder. These were 3 younger universities, and they were trying to build up the enrollment. So they listed the top 100 professors in these schools. Luther's not mentioned. So in 1515, he's not a known entity. Take note, I'm setting the chessboard. 1520, he is the most published author in the Holy Roman Empire of the German nation. So between 1515 and 1520, Luther goes from the sidelines to stardom. He is in the top 10. He is up there. He is the most famous person in the German-speaking territories. He goes from unknown to, hi, I'm in the spotlights. I'm a star. So what happens here? All right. So now we're just setting up some of the pieces that are on the chessboard. So there's an event that is going to propel Luther into the center stage of everything. All right, so here it is. And the person who's going to assist is called Frederick the Wise. Frederick the Wise, he is going to be one of the players on the chessboard, a major player. He may be, his university city may be Wittenberg that only has 2,500 people, as opposed to Erfurt that has 20,000, but he's a player in the game. And I'm going to explain that. So here is his elector. All right, now you have in front of you a very complicated map. You see red and you see yellow. What happens here in the 1400s, the family that ruled all these territories decided, they had two sons, and they decided to split the territories between the two sons. Okay, so that they would each have a piece of the territory. So the oldest son was allowed to draw the divisions. And so the oldest son drew the divisions, the red and the yellow. The youngest son got to choose which territory they wanted. The youngest son chose the yellow. Okay, so the yellow is called Ducal Saxony. There's a duke. There's a duke. And you see there, right about here, you see there's Leipzig. You see Leipzig. Dresden is down over here. Leipzig has an older university. It is very well established. You see this? You see the red territory here has Wittenberg, and Wittenberg is there, and that is called electoral Saxony. So if you can hold those thoughts for a moment, something is going to come together as I'm setting the pieces on the chessboard. There is Ducal Saxony, which is the yellow, has a duke. There is red, which is electoral Saxony, which has an elector. And I'm going to explain that because that's the game. So here you are. Here is the event. This is the event that sets everything into motion. What you are looking at is an indulgence. This is what it looks like. Printers loved to print indulgences. They were easy to print. You just printed on one side and you put them on the table. The person came in, picked them up, paid the bill, you handed them 2,000 or 3,000 indulgences, you're done. If a printer printed a book, they have to do multiple sides and they have to deal with distribution. Printing an indulgence was great because you didn't have to worry about distribution. That was the church's problem. This is what an indulgence looked like. There are blank spaces because when you purchased the indulgence, they would fill in the blank spaces with your name, the dates, etc. So this is the indulgence, all right? Albert, by the grace of God and the apostolic see Archbishop of Mainz and Magdeburg. Here's an indulgence. You could buy one of these. So we are selling indulgences. And if you went through confirmation, you may have heard about Tetzel. So when they issued this particular indulgence, they hired one of the best sellers. This is a person who knew how to sell an indulgence. When the coin into the box springs, another soul into heaven leaps. You know, he had these little poems. He had all these little poems that he could do, and I just messed that one up. But it's sort of when the coin into the box clings, another soul into heaven springs, basically. So he is the person who is selling the indulgence, and that's his little treasury box where you're going to put the coins. Here's the indulgence here, and you see all these little seals here. These are the bulls. These are the people who signed off on it. So these are the sale of indulgences. And this is what's going to be the event that triggers a moment, and the pieces on the chessboard are going to start to move. So the sale and the purchase of an indulgence guaranteed you paradise. So let's talk about this. Let's set the record straight here and let's talk about this. So Tetzel is selling an indulgence. This was a common practice in the Middle Ages in Europe. Now, the elector of Saxony is ruler of the territories in red. So he says to Tetzel, you cannot sell your indulgence in my territory, period. All right, this is important. The elector says you may not sell the indulgence in my territory. So what happens is very important here, because Tetzel comes to this village, Zerbst, and he comes to this village, Jüterbog, and he sells the indulgence. People from Wittenberg who are interested in the indulgence, cross the border and they buy the indulgence. And Luther finds out that they have purchased these indulgences, even though the elector has said, you will not sell the indulgence in my territory. All right. So why is the elector prohibiting the sale of indulgences? Does he disagree with the sale of indulgences? No. Remember, I said the Castle Church, we were just down there when Luther received his doctorate in theology. The church is called All Saints. All Saints, Allerheiligen, All Saints. And you know when All Saints is celebrated, November 1st. So here we are. The elector of Saxony has said to Tetzel, you may not sell your indulgences in my territory. There is Zerbst, there's Jüterbog, outside his territory. That's where Tetzel shows up. Parishioners purchase them and go back home to Wittenberg. Now, why does the elector say you can't come into my territory? This is his church, All Saints. He has a collection of 19,000 relics in that church that are in 10 galleries in the Castle Church and are opened for display on All Saints, November 1st, which is the name of the church. If you look at all 19,000 relics, you gain 1,902,000 days of absolution. That's pretty good. So it's not that the elector was opposed to indulgences, it is that he had his own system up and running. And so he wanted people to come to the Castle Church to see the relics and leave a donation in the offering box. You see how this is playing itself out? So all of a sudden, people are crossing the border, buying Tetzel's indulgences, and here they are, and the elector has his own relics where he is offering indulgences, an indulgence, the days of absolution that you're granted. What I'm saying here, please don't see Frederick the Wise as anything. He is a very pious person. He's an exceedingly pious person. The faith means a great deal to him. This is very important to him. This is not a business. This is his piety, and he is helping his people by presenting them with all the relics that he has assembled, and he's put it there for them so that they can see it and gain the heavenly blessings. Okay, so please let's hold on to that. So here's the indulgence that they have now bought, and it's filled out. They come in. And they come into Wittenberg and they get into the confessional and they say to Luther, well, I'm all taken care of. And Luther is very concerned about what's going on here. This is the bronze door to the Castle Church, which you can see. And these are the 95 theses cast in bronze. In one of the renovations, they put this up there. In Luther's day, it was a simple wooden door where you posted announcements. And there he is. There is Luther. This is one of the most iconic images of Luther with a hammer, hammering up his 95 theses, questioning the abuse of indulgences. Do you give an academic a hammer? I don't think it's a good idea. Probably in all likelihood, there were nails already there. He just put up an announcement. Does Luther remember doing this? No. When he was asked how this all started, he couldn't remember. So on October 31st, 1517, something is happening. Why? Well, the next day is November 1st, All Saints. The doors will be opened. People will see the relics. They will gain absolution. So let's talk about what's happening now. We do know one thing for sure. Luther wrote 2 letters, one to his bishop, Jerome Schulte, in Magdeburg, and Albert of Mainz, and he is in Mainz. And this is one of the big pieces on the chessboard we're setting up, okay? So he writes 2 letters. So did he post the theses? Well, if it's a matter of semantics, yes, he went to the mailbox and he mailed the theses, so he posted them on October 31st, 1517. What was he asking for? A lecture, and actually not a lecture, a debate an academic debate on the abuses of indulgences. All right? Not on the theology of the indulgences. That's where he will end up. Right now, let's talk about the abuse. And that's what he wanted to talk about. So here's a chessboard. So we have church, pope, emperor, prince, French, Habsburgs, Turks. All of these forces are going to mobilize now as these pieces start moving. So let's start watching them move. All right. So bear with me here. Here's a map. This is what the Holy Roman Empire, this is a small portion of the Holy Roman Empire, the German nation. Every color is a different place. It is not an empire, it's a confederation. There are 300 different principalities with archbishop, princes, electors, dukes, counts, everybody involved in this, bishops, archbishops, you know. As I said to my students, please don't say Germany. Luther was talking to Germany. Germany didn't exist until 1871 as a political unit. Please refer to it as German-speaking territories. So this is what it looks like. Just his little area. Very, very complicated. It's a crazy quilt. I remember using that way back, a crazy quilt. Needles and pins would love this. This is a quilt. You know, you can do a quilt of the Holy Roman Empire, the German nation. Here's a task, you know, here's what it looks like. He mails a letter, and he mails the letter from Wittenberg to Halle, because that's where Albrecht has a house. Albert, I will call him Albert. I sometimes use his German name. Albert has a residence in Halle, but he's not home. He's not home. So they have to mail the letter to where they think he is in Aschaffenburg, which he is. Aschaffenburg, beautiful city. Oh, the palace sits on top of the hill, looks out over the river, beautiful city. The letter finally arrives in Aschaffenburg, and Albert, the Archbishop of Mainz, who issued the indulgence, now reads these theses where this monk, whom he has never heard of, decides he wants to have a debate about the abuses of indulgences. He doesn't like what he's reading, but he's not sure. So what does he do? He mails it to his theological faculty, which is in Mainz, which is right over here on the left. So he sends this letter on December 1st. Remember, it's posted. He posted on October 31st. December 1st, the University of Mainz finally gets the letter. So it goes to Halle, it comes to Aschaffenburg, and it finally reaches Mainz in December 1st. So this is the world that moves at 3 miles an hour. If we can move at 3 miles an hour, there's no FedEx, no UPS, no overnight delivery. So it takes over a month for it to finally get there. Mainz is saying, I think we have something new here. And that's a problem. You do not want to hear, oh, he's thinking something new. That's not good. The revered, the tradition, that's what you talk about. Something new, dangerous. We think there's something new, so we're going to send it on to Rome. So Luther's little letter, his one copy of the letter gets copied and copied and copied, and finally is sent to Rome. So it arrives to the papal palace of Leo X, who is a de Medici, and he turns it over to his theologian, his Dominican theologian named Priarius. And Priarius reads Luther's theses in 3 days and decides, anyone who doubts the authority of the Pope is a heretic. So let me explain what has just happened. Priarius reads the theses and in 3 days says, we have a heretic. Now, if you can imagine for a second, legal proceedings have been filed and there's a format that has to be followed. All right. So now Rome has moved a piece. The Pope has moved. Luther, you are guilty of heresy. So here we are. This is the conviction. Whoever does not hold to the teaching of the Roman Church and the Pope as an infallible rule of faith from which even Holy Scripture draws its power and authority is a heretic. There it is. He's a heretic. So now the piece has moved, and all these little pieces that are on this board are going to start to move because we now have a heretic and there is a process. So here's the key player. Here's the key player, the Archbishop of Mainz and Magdeburg. His name is Albert. I always call him Albrecht. I always like this. Here it is. So why is Albrecht so important? This is the history of the world, 1493. This is the history of the world. We've seen this book before. This is a page that is very important. The 7 individuals, the 3 on the left, the 4 on the right, are the electors. The emperor of the Holy Roman Empire of the German nation is elected. It is not a hereditary title. And there are only 7 people who cast a ballot. 3 archbishops, 4 princes who are called electors, Kurfürst, as we would say in German. When you said that name, when you said that title, Kurfürst, you bowed. They were the power brokers because the emperor had to draw the election from them. So Albert here is Archbishop of Mainz, and Mainz is one of the electors. There he is. That's his little picture. That's Mainz. There it is. And there's Albert. His brother is a Hohenzollern as well. He is an elector. So the Hohenzollerns have 2 electors on the board who will elect the next emperor. Please watch the pieces. So let's continue now. So here's Mainz, and here's Albert. He is the archbishop. He will cast a ballot for the next emperor. All right, here's Brandenburg. These are the 4. Bohemia, the Palatinate, Saxony, Brandenburg. Brandenburg, there's the elector of Brandenburg. So the 2 boys, the 2 Brandenburg boys, the 2 Hohenzollern boys will cast a ballot. All right, who are they casting a ballot for? Well, here's the indulgence. Let's keep moving here. Before we talk about this, let's go back and talk about what the indulgence is. What is the fuss all about? In the theology at this time, repentance was composed of 3 parts: contrition, confession, and satisfaction. Contrition: I feel sorry for my sin. I'm upset about my sin. I know I've done wrong. So I will go to the priest and I will confess. Okay, so that's part 2. Part 3 is the penance, the satisfaction of this. All right, so that you understand, you will say certain prayers, and usually at the end of it, they said, and go make a donation to a poor person. So when people were outside of churches, sitting there begging, they were there because they knew that people were coming out of the confessional, and the priest had said, give a donation to a poor person. And the whole point of the satisfaction was that you realized what you had done, and you were trying to make it right with your neighbor, what you had done. It was to make it important so that you wouldn't do the same thing again. If you follow me here? Where does forgiveness come from? From Christ, okay? The forgiveness always came from Christ. Christ's death on the cross, that was critical to this. It always comes from the cross. The confession was the act where you confessed it to a priest, and the priest then absolved you of your sins, but then you had to do penance, okay? And so there's where the indulgence initially came in. You bought the indulgence and you had already turned in your money. You'd already made the donation. You're clear. You felt sorry, you confessed, you had the indulgence, all was well. All right, and so the problem is, and we're going to see this in a moment, you have to do new and improved. You have to do new and improved, all right? So Albrecht, in order to sell the indulgence, said the indulgence gives you forgiveness of sins and remission of guilt. And this upset Luther, because forgiveness of sins comes from the cross, not from this piece of paper. The remission of guilt comes from Christ, not from this piece of paper. So this is where Luther is, this is the abuse. This is the abuse that is going on. So how can I explain this? If you look at what I've got up on the screen right now, it's called indulgence fatigue. Indulgences were around for a long time. People purchased them. In order to boost sales, you made more promises, and hence the promise that the sins were forgiven, remission of guilt, and it could forgive the sins of your dead, deceased ancestors. You could buy them for the dead because the indulgences were no longer selling. You look at Speyer, in 1502, they got 3,000 gulden for indulgence. 1517, 200. Frankfurt, they were down to 304. So what we call is an indulgence fatigue, that you needed to boost up the promises of the indulgence in order to make it sell. So hence Albert, or I always say Albrecht, promises forgiveness of sin and remission of guilt. Luther gets very upset with that. You can't say those things. So now let's put some of the pieces together. Here is Albert, Archbishop of Mainz, elector. We have indulgence fatigue. Frederick the Wise said, your salesman, Tetzel, cannot come into my territory. And now he is attacked by one of Frederick's professors. He has no idea who he is. Martin Luther, I don't know who he is. So if you put all of those components together, you get a very cranky Albert or a cranky Albrecht. So now Luther has been declared a heretic. So Frederick the Wise, who is Frederick the Wise in all of this? Saxon. He is in Saxony. He is the ruler of electoral Saxony. I've just said the magic word. He is an elector. So let's put him in the diagram. On the left is Maximilian. On the right is Albert. Below is Frederick the Wise. And next to him is Albert's brother, the Elector of Brandenburg. So you now see some pieces in this moment. Frederick the Wise is an elector. So when Luther is declared a heretic, they said, you're sending him to Rome. Frederick the Wise says, no, I'm not. And that's the end of it. He is the elector. When he speaks, the world listens. He's not going to Rome. He will be tried here in the German-speaking territories. I'm not sending Luther to Rome. Forget it. Not a possibility. So do you see where we're headed now? Do you see how this is coming about? So the person on the left is the emperor. Who have I got? So here's my chessboard again. I have the church, the Pope, the emperor, prince, the French, the Habsburgs, the Turks. They're all in here. Here we go. So who am I looking at? Emperor Maximilian. He's a Habsburg. There he is. He is the emperor of spin. He has got this down. What does he know about? The printing press. He knows how to use the printing press. That's what it looks like. We'll talk about that at another time. So there it is. You can put an image, a woodcut in a printing press, and voila, you've got this fantastic picture. That's a woodcut of Maximilian. He knew how important it was. He could print hundreds of these and send them all over. You put them on city gates. You put them on a city wall. You know who Maximilian is. You may have never seen him, but you know who he is. He is the emperor. And there he is. So image, text, imagination in the printing press gives you, ta-da, this is the Arch of Triumph. This was at the Art Museum several years ago. They reassembled it. It's 92 separate huge woodcuts that extol the virtue of the Habsburg family and Maximilian. They sent these out to hundreds of cities. They plastered these, pasted these on the city wall. When you looked at this, there's no TV, there's no Facebook, there's no iPhone. You don't see, you look at this and you think, wow, that's impressive. So here you have it. This was the glory of the Habsburgs. This is who they are. This is their glorious moment. And there this angel is holding the crown of the Habsburgs, the emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. And that falls on Maximilian. And there he is at the top, in the middle, on the throne. There he is with his electors next to him. There you have it. Albert, Frederick, and then the Elector of Brandenburg. Boom. So what's going on here? We have Cologne. We have Mainz Albert is Mainz. And then we have Saxony. We have Brandenburg. We have a lot of moving pieces here. So what is going on here? This is 1517. Well, Maximilian is old. And as of 1514, he never traveled without a coffin because he knew death was knocking. You know, he never left home without it. You know the commercial. He never left home without it. And everybody knew that Maximilian was older and they would be summoned to elect the next emperor of the Holy Roman Empire of the German nation. Well, Albert's upset with Luther. So is the Elector of Brandenburg. But one of the electors is the Elector of Saxony, and he says, Luther's not going very far right now. Okay, so there we have this. So Maximilian will die on January 12th, 1519. So there we have this. This is this wonderful moment, So I'm going to stop the recording in case I may have confused you. I hope I haven't. I've just tried to set a chessboard up and show you how Luther posts 2 letters and doesn't realize what he's done. He doesn't realize it. You know, he's astonished. You know, he went to have an academic debate. Nobody showed up. And then all of a sudden he's declared a heretic. And it's like, what did I do? So this is the wonderful moment. This is a wonderful moment. And we're going to stop.